So thank you, everyone. Welcome to our event, our first event of this project, which concerns the Parents and Carers Network of Networks in Higher Education in the UK. This is a partnership project between Newcastle University and Northumbria University, and it's funded by BA, so British Academy Leverhulme Trust. So we are about a year into it now. It's been quite a year. We've really made some great progress, and we're really excited to talk to you and share information and learn from your experiences as well. We have a packed agenda today. And just to give you a brief introduction, my name is Dr. Mark Gatto. I work at Northumbria. I'm delighted to be joined by my co-investigator, Dr. Anna Lopez, and she works at Newcastle University. We also have a wonderful group of stakeholders in our project group members, some of whom will be speaking today. We have Madiha, Sajid, who is one of the founders of the national network, and she's you can scroll to see her. She'll have her waving there, which is nice. And we also have Kelechi Dibie joining us today. We have Dr. Jasmine Kelland, and we have Elliott Ray, and we also have many other members of our project group. Faya Kovacic is here, of course, from Durham, one of our most engaged members, and delighted to have her here today. So the whole ethos of our project is about community engagement and to learn about these networks and hopefully be part of their growth and development. Anna, would you like to say anything further before I pass over to Madiha to do an introduction to the story of the network?
I just want to say hello. Thanks for the introduction, Mark. I will speak to you in a minute when I talk about the survey and the analysis that we're doing. But just to say a little bit about myself, I'm based at Newcastle University, as Mark said. I'm a senior lecturer in work and employment. My research is mostly about diversity and especially gender issues, and I'm very interested in participatory action research. So when Mark had the idea for this project and invited me to collaborate, I thought that would be my contribution, is my experience and passion for collaborative and action research methods. But actually, I realized through my collaboration with Mark and other people in this call that I am actually a carer, something that until then I hadn't quite realized. My partner had been diagnosed with a condition, and it took me quite a while to realize my role as a carer. So even though I started as a kind of an outsider to the group, I'm now part of the carers group in my university, of course, and I've actually just applied to become one of the co-chairs of the network. So now I'm also an activist in this area.
That's great. And I forgot to mention that I am a parent of two, aged 1 and 4, and that's a big part of my life at the moment. So yes, we have that lived experience that we bring to the project, and we are part of these networks as well as we are learning about them. So with no further ado, I'll pass you over to Madiha Sajid, and she's going to talk to us about the origins of the national network of parents and carers in higher education.
Thank you very much, Mark and Anna. Good afternoon, everybody. I have my colleague Ellen here today as well. Before I pass on to Ellen, I would like to give a quick intro about myself. My name is Madiha. I'm based at Imperial College London, and the best way I can introduce myself is that I am also a parent to an now 18-year-old wonderful daughter. I'm also a carer. I care for my sister, my mother, who lives in a different country. So the lived experience is really, really valuable and really important to what we will be describing in the next few minutes. So before I come back, I would like to pass on to Ellen, who will just tell you about the beginning, and then I'll come back in a minute.
Hi everyone, thanks Madiha. Yes, my name is Ellen. I used to work at the University of Reading, actually since left higher education. But back in 2019, I set up the University of Reading's Parent and Family Network, as a result of coming back from maternity leave and realising how important kind of peer support and having those information sharing networks really were. And in the course of setting up that network, I contacted a couple of other networks that I'd found online to ask questions about things I'd seen that they were doing that I'd like to replicate, or to kind of get advice on what I wanted to do with our new network. And kind of through those conversations, first of all, I realised kind of how valuable it was actually using the experience and the knowledge that already existed out there in other networks. And I also realised that there was an appetite amongst kind of other people as well to be able to share that information and connect with other network leads who are all trying to do kind of similar things. So I turned to Google and just tried to find as many kind of parent and carer networks as I could, and then contacted I can't remember, maybe kind of about 20 or so, I think, just asking if people would be interested in kind of linking up and having a way of sharing best practice, and kind of providing the peer support and the information sharing that we all do at a kind of more local level within individual networks, and kind of being a way of just trying to kind of pool our resources and pool our knowledge. And had a really positive response from people, which is fantastic. I think a lot of people were having similar thoughts without realizing it. And one of the people who kind of responded positively and was keen to take the idea forwards was Madiha. So I'll let you pick up from there.
Thank you very much, Ellen. So about 10 years ago, I was based at UCL, University College London, and I was invited to sort of set up a parents and carers network at UCL. It was very new to me, but of course, because of my lived experience, it all came very naturally to me. And I set up the UCL university-wide network for parents and carers. We established throughout the university that we are the one voice, the one platform for parents and carers, because nothing like that existed prior to that network. And very quickly, I'm very pleased to say, we became the gold standard of setting up staff networks and setting up support networks for the university communities. We provided lots of supportive advice and information. We did lots of signposting. We did lots of campaigning. And I can give you two tangible examples of the outcomes of the UCL network, which were, one of them was that we were able to influence the policy to introduce the COVID leave. This is, now I'm talking about the COVID days. And the other thing which we were able to establish was specific dedicated maternity support and parental support to staff members who were going away on maternity leave or parental leave or adoption leave. So those were the two tangible outcomes of the UCL Parents and Carers Network. Fast forward to COVID years, now I'm talking about the lockdown in those 3 years, which we all have gone through together as a country, as a nation, as a world, really. And very quickly, I realized that parents and carers were struggling a lot during lockdowns, dealing with their caring responsibilities, parental responsibilities, having to juggle work, family, etc., etc. And I was providing a lot of support for parents and carers during those years. And very quickly, it became a very, very harsh reality that actually the challenges and the issues faced by parents and carers across the sector were very similar. So we started opening up our sessions, our drop-in support sessions to everybody across the country. Then that very quickly evolved into what Ellen has just described, the National Network for Parents and Carers in Higher Education. And now it is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a national network. It is for all parents, all carers who work in higher education. And by higher education, I don't only mean universities. I also mean funding bodies. I mean think tanks. I mean reporting agencies, etc. I see lots of familiar names on the call today. So I'm delighted to see that the campaigning has begun and there is a change happening already across the sector. And what I like to call as a legacy is that parents and carers have a more improved and a more visible presence now across universities. They have a more unified voice and our challenges are more recognized now as part of our lived experience. So I'm really, really welcoming the idea of this conversation today. Thank you to Mark and Anna for really helping us all come together and having these conversations. And I look forward to hearing more. Thank you very much. Back to Mark and Anna.
Thank you so much, Ellen and Madiha. It's great to have you both here. And yes, you are the reason that we're here as well. So really incredibly grateful that we are able to learn more and and you're part of this story. So no, it's really, it wouldn't be happening without you. So really grateful. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Anna now to talk about our survey and also the rest of our project and how it's progressing. And just I put a message in the chat there just to say, if you have any questions as you're going through, please just put them in the chat, and we'll be able to answer those as we go. But there will be other opportunities to ask questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the project so far. So as Mark said, we're more or less a year into the project, and we have several phases. So we started with a kind of a mapping exercise, and we were helped by Noshin Khan, who's our research assistant. And what she did was she picked up where people in this call were in terms of having contacts in different universities with parents and carers network. And what she did was she tried to update that database. So we have a more accurate database of who is who in each university or higher education institution, whether each of these places has a parents or a parents and carers network, and where there is no network or no named person really to go to. So we have a kind of a better map of the situation of the country so far. Once we did that, we had that list of contacts. We then developed a survey questionnaire. Our project group helped us to make sure that we had the right questions and relevant and useful questions. And then we distributed that survey online to as many members of networks and people in universities and other higher education institutions as we could. Many of you on the call have helped us distribute it and have filled it in yourselves, and we're grateful for that. And I'll say a little bit about what we've learned from the survey. And one of the things that we asked in the survey was, are you happy to be interviewed for this research project? And we are now in the phase of interviewing all those who volunteered. We are very happy with the number of people who volunteered, so we're hoping that we'll be able to do quite a significant number of interviews. And what we're using, both the survey, the interviews, and situations like today's workshop, is to inform the toolkit that Mark talked about. So there's a very practical outcome of the project, and that will be our final phase of developing the project. So key findings from the survey. First of all, we got responses from across the whole of the UK, which was really good. And we got 261 responses, which we are happy about. We think it's okay. And here are some numbers, some quantitative data that we got from the survey. So the great majority of those who answered the survey identify as a woman, as a mother. So this question, you could identify as several things. It was, you could choose various options, but mother was the key answer there. So, where are the fathers? Where are the men? The great majority also told us that they joined their networks to share information. A majority are also in informal networks. We're very interested in this notion of informal or formal networks. So the majority seem to be informal. That is, even if they have support from EDI and other structures in the institution, they are not exactly part of that structure. So they're more informally organized and set up. A majority see a key priority for the national network as campaigning for better rights for parents and carers in these institutions. A minority, but a significant minority of 24%, disagree that they have opportunities to discuss their carer role. So that, I think, is a significant finding. And then we had a series of questions around COVID-19 and the legacy of COVID-19. We're interested in this, but we also want to be able to compare our findings to previous surveys that were done in this area. So a great majority reported home working as a positive legacy of COVID-19, and 70% reported flexible working as a positive legacy of COVID-19. Next slide, please. So we are very interested in the open questions and the more qualitative findings, really. So one of the questions was about the perception of parents and carers networks. So PCN stands for Parents and Carers Networks. And the majority described these networks as a supportive space. So that's a key term that came up in the survey answers, supportive space. Another thing that came through these answers was that many members felt or were disengaged. Typically, they cited lack of time constraints, and the limitations of the way the network operates in terms of the lack of community building. So, something that we want to dig into in the interviews. When we asked members and those who answered the questions in our survey, what do they value in their network? Again, they said supportive and judgment-free spaces and sharing information and resources. These seem to be key. But many also say that they value being able to engage on this topic of parents and carers in higher education, whether that is through discussions, policy, influencing, and so on. And many members also mentioned these networks as helping them to feel less alone. Next one. We also asked in the survey, what one thing would you like your workplace to change? And here we tried to group the answers in terms of whether they are more relevant to parents and carers. So these ones are kind of general. The main priority is definitely flexible working. Also more carer-centered scheduling within the institution, whether that is for meetings, events, and so on. Improving the consistency and support of line management. So we were aware of that, depending on what line manager you have a better or worse situation. So some more consistency, and that links to the formal point of formalizing policy enhancements, so they're not at the mercy of having a good line manager. And another important one that came up again and again was improving attitudes to part-time work, changing the culture of the workplace, and the opportunities for progression around this context of part-time work. As I said, some answers were more focused on relevant to carers in particular, and this was mostly about raising awareness of caring needs and carers' needs, particularly those caring for the elderly, and also issues related to COVID-19, like awareness of how some issues have been exacerbated and the implications of long COVID. More parent-focused answers tended to talk about improving the return to work support in different institutions, breastfeeding support, help with childcare fees, and improvements to paid parental leave. Next one. Okay, so our overall takeaways so far from our analysis of what we've learned in the survey is that we are very happy with the engagement in the survey, as I said, in terms of the numbers of responses we got, but also the richness of the responses, especially in these open questions where we feel that we have a lot to explore, and we will take those learning points to our interviews. We are definitely very interested in analyzing this governance of networks and ways of organizing them, whether informal or formal. This is something that we're working on. We are intrigued by the issue of disengagement of some of the network members. So we think it's important to find out why this is happening and what can be done. We are also concerned with the lack of engagement from men and fathers, hence, part of the program in today's workshop. And we are very happy that more than 90 people volunteered to participate in our interviews. We are now in the process of contacting all these people, and many have already been interviewed or set up interviews. And also, I would like to, extend the invitation to anyone in the workshop today. If you haven't volunteered yet and you'd like to, please get in touch with myself or Mark, because we would like to hear your views in a more detailed way through an interview. And that's a very quick overview of what was learned in the survey. More of this in the future, but for now, this is kind of a summary of our survey analysis.
Thank you so much, Anna. I think we're really kind of excited by where we're at, and I think it's given us a nice platform to start talking about some of our learning points and also see where we're going to be heading next. And those themes that Anna has discussed there, we're hoping that you'll see the thread in this webinar. So I'm really delighted to introduce and welcome Dr. Jasmine Kelland and Elliott Ray, who will be speaking to us about fathers forums and also dads networks, and focusing on how we can encourage more engagement with fathers and dads in networks. So delighted for them to join us, and I will pass you over to Jasmine first. We'll speak to you about her research.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm really glad that you clicked from that previous image, because that picture was taken a number of years ago. Nobody wants to be reminded of the aging process quite so acutely. So thank you for having us at this event. I'm really pleased to be here and to be chatting to you about fatherhood forums. This is something that I think is really important when it comes to gender equality for parents, and fatherhood forums I think are a really sort of key resource. So I'm delighted to be involved and to tell you a little bit about my views and my research in this area. Just before we kick off, just a little bit about my background. So I work at the University of Plymouth, as the logo suggests. I've been here for about 10 years and researching fathers for about 8 of them. My interest in this area was very much around my own experiences, as often the case with researchers. I'm a mother of 3 daughters. I'm all teenagers now, and the eldest is just coming out of her teens. But certainly when the children were young, I've kind of worked full time now most of the time. My husband has as well. And we've had quite a lot of challenges really along the way, and found it really quite frustrating that we were trying to have quite an equal involvement in the childcare. And we were routinely facing quite a lot of challenges, particularly my husband when he was needing to do school runs and emergency pickups and that sort of thing, the challenges that we faced. So my research in this area was very much born out of an interest to explore if other families were having the same sort of experiences, if they were encountering the same things. And then also from an organisational point of view, I teach HR, that's my background. So I'm really keen to look at ways organisations can improve the experience of parents in the workplace. And this is very much where my research is located. Can we move to the next slide? I'm not sure who's got control. Thank you. So I think we'll all kind of agree that in lots of ways, perceptions of fatherhood are changing. And I think certainly if you think about sort of my parents' generation, for example, things have changed a lot. There's a real expectation that fathers will have an active role in caregiving, that fathers will be involved in all the wonderful things that often mothers are. And I think that's really changed in this environment. However, there are quite a lot of challenges when it comes to actually the reality of that. So whilst I think we all would agree that the perceptions of fatherhood has changed over the sort of last 20, 30 years, however, there hasn't been a huge change in the actual working practices of fathers. So particularly mothers are more likely to have a special arrangement to manage work and care than fathers are. They're more likely to access work-life balances than policies than fathers are. So despite this sort of evidence that this sort of traditional male breadwinner model in the UK is receding, there's lots of other evidence that says actually it's still quite alive and well. And particularly certainly in my region, it's really, really sort of prominent. And there is quite a lot of barriers to caregiving, which is kind of where I'm going with this, which is why the importance of fatherhood forums. I think the challenges that face mums and dads is very different. as a mum of 3, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't have any challenges as a working mum. I can guarantee you that I have lots of challenges, but they are, I think, are very different to the challenges that have been faced by my husband and fathers in this space. So what I wanted to just kind of talk to you about for the next couple of slides is some research that I've done looking at dads to highlight how the challenges are a little bit different, and then lead into highlighting the importance of fatherhood forums, why there's real benefits for specific fatherhood forums as well as motherhood forums and parent networks more generally. And then Elliott will go into more sort of practical guidance of how to make that work. Could we go to the next slide? So there are quite a lot of sort of quite specific challenges for dads, and this is this project that I did with some colleagues in France. Particularly, we looked at fathers who've been unsuccessful in requesting flexible working arrangements and what some of the challenges were for them. And we found in this project that supervising fathers were a real challenge to fathers in this environment, particularly when fathers who were existing supervisors who were fathers themselves and often tended to have younger children. And it was really quite interesting that they were quite causing quite a sort of challenge for their employees who were trying to be actively involved in caregiving. We found that there was quite a lot of dissuasion that occurred, and that took a number of different forms. Some of the forms that we found was, so we called it gender role confirming discourses, but this was very much questioning someone's decision. So if a dad needed to go, for example, to do a school run, it was kind of eye rolling. Well, why are you doing it? I don't understand why you going. Lots and lots of questions about that. We also found evidence of career threats. So the supervising managers saying, you know, do you really think you should be doing that? What about your career? There's a promotion coming up. I really think you should do this trip. And then when childcare was mentioned as a reason why they couldn't, it was sort of saying that's really going to affect your career longer term. Lots of practical reasons were given as justification to why the flexible working arrangements weren't possible, and that's something I think that we can kind of that echoes from the mother literature as well. But generally, we sort of felt from that research there was a real lack of workplace supports for dads, and that was kind of one of the overarching sort of things that came out of that research, that there was a lack of support. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the fatherhood forfeit work is where I've spent a lot of my sort of career the last couple of years. My PhD was based on this work, and also I've had a book in this space. So the fatherhood forfeits, as I've identified, has 4 sort of main elements. It says that fathers are less likely to obtain a role that allows them to combine work and caregiving, such as part-time employment in the examples that I used. Found that caregiving fathers are often considered as secondary parents. So the automatic assumption is that a mum and a child go together. So when a sort of dad is in that space, or when a dad is trying to get flexibility or workplace support, they're always considered to be secondary. And that was the case even when they were a primary parent. When they were a single dad or a primary parent, there was still lots of questions were asked in the workplace around the level of support. And it was always sort of inferred that the mum would get the support first because they were the primary parent. And then if the mum was not available, there's lots of, one of the codes in my research was kind of where's mum, and that's something that was asked certainly by my husband's case. Often he'd go to anywhere with the children, the first thing I would always say is where's Jazz? Well, because shame Jazz couldn't make it, and there's a kind of a sort of tilt of the head, and so, which made him feel generally terrible. And we found that a lot in the research in this space, that lots of dads are having that experience. Closely linked to that, as with the other research, but caregiving fathers were having less workplace support, and it was a lot hard to come by and quite subject to negotiation. And for some of the dads that I spoke to in this research, they could get workplace support, but they needed to negotiate a lot harder. And quite often it was around the location of the mother before they could be granted. So one of the examples that I often use is what the example that participant gave, where they were saying that they will be allowed to go to work, but leave work if my son was sick, but I would need to be really clear about the location of my wife, of my mum, of my mother-in-law, and just about the nursery arrangements, everybody else. And once all that was established, that no one else could go, the leave would be granted. However, there was a real period of negotiation that the mums that I spoke to in my work didn't come across. And the last thing that came up in the fatherhood forfeit work was that fathers face social mistreatment, and this is building on earlier work that's found similar things. Particularly that fathers face mockery when they want to take an active role and need to change their hours accordingly. that often this is associated with being idle in some way as an avoidance of work rather than wanting to be actively involved, that they will struggle with friendships and exclusion, and they will find that that's quite a sort of complex space to be in. So again, this sort of highlights how the experience of fathers who want to be actively involved is a little bit different to mums, highlighting how important it can be to have a designated space for fathers, such as fatherhood forums. And the last bit of research I wanted to share with you is something that I'm presenting at a conference next week. So it hasn't been published yet, it's just under review. But this is some work I've done looking at social media comments, which is a really interesting space. I don't know if anyone's ever done any research for social media comments, but there's a lot of things you can't use and a lot of things that are inappropriate. But when you really kind of go through it and analyse it, you get some really good sort of data. And I'm really sort of pleased what we were able to distill from the data. But particularly, we sort of found there was further evidence of fathers receiving fatherhood forfeits when they're in work, and also the patriarchal deficit, which is work done by Bailey, which particularly talks about the secondary positioning that I mentioned. We found another forfeit in this research, particularly looking at impeded attractiveness, and many participants on the forums were talking about how they would find a father who was actively involved in caregiving, they would find that less attractive. So that's another sort of forfeit that seems to be emerging for caregiving fathers. More generally, we observed that fathers who were taking an active role in caregiving, almost unilaterally in the sample, had a really disregarding discourse towards any criticism. And what I mean by that is they had quite a sort of maverick approach to their caregiving. So they were very much like, I will sort of be criticised and I don't care because I'm not bothered about that criticism. I'm going to fight for my children. So really sort of really demonstrating that they were quite sort of groundbreaking in their approach. And what I think is going to be interesting for the workplace around this is that can be quite a challenge when it comes to performance management, because sometimes that sort of behaviour might be at odds with organisational norms of behaviour. It might be challenging for customer service because it might manifest as someone being really quite negative when all they're actually doing is to take an active role in caregiving, that they might want to work part-time or more flexibly. So this is another sort of challenge I think that's emerging for dads, highlighting the need for having a separate space for dads within your framework of forums within your organisation. We could go to the next one. So there's lots of reasons fatherhood forums are a good idea, and I know Elliott's going to go through some of them as well. As I've hopefully kind of illustrated, workplace support for parents is largely, whilst it's kind of suggested to be largely neutral, all the policies will be gender neutral. However, the sort of access rates are low and very different for fathers than they are for mothers. And there's a real sort of business benefit, I think, for having fatherhood forums. If you have staff who are happier in work, if they feel that their work-life balance is being addressed, if they feel like some of the challenges that have been highlighted are being addressed, are being discussed, are being in a supportive environment, people are going to be more productive. So I think if you're trying to get sort of board buy-in for these sort of things, it's a real win-win situation. It's a really good opportunity for fathers to have that discussion, to share their views, but also to raise the profile of any issues that they might be feeling. And also it can be central to attraction and retention. It can be seen as a sort of non-monetary benefit, and I'm putting workplace support for parents very much aligned with forums here, because I think it's a really good source of support. And if you do have people in your organisation who feel supported, they are more likely to not only work hard and be more productive, but you're more likely to want to join your organisation and to stay when they're in your organisation. The fatherhood forums can really create a sense of community for fathers, as was kind of sort of picked up a little bit before, of giving fathers an opportunity to share their concerns and to highlight any common challenges they might have, but also to explore ways to overcome them. Whilst any sort of forum, and I think anyone who's been involved in forums before, it's really good to sit around with your peers and to have a really good old moan, and we all enjoy that, and that's really important. But what's also important is looking at ways you can overcome that. So to actually share your experiences, and if you are, for example, if you're finding that you've been feeling really sort of disregarded by your manager, if you feel that every time you need to go to pick up your children you get an eye roll, as I mentioned before, you get negative treatment, it might be that when you talk to your peers in the fatherhood forums, that everybody in the group says, that happens to me, my manager always treats me like that, which gives you a real sort of sense of kind of community, but also being able to have something to do with that. It gives you more voice because you can discuss that with each other and take that forward and say, okay, let's really try and deal with this in the organisation. Let's have a new policy on this, let's address this to try and minimise some of these challenges and improve the workplace experience for both parents. Because don't forget, you know, if fathers are experiencing these challenges, what happens for many couples is, as a result of that, the fathers will no longer take such an active role, and quite often then that will fall more to the mothers. There's huge assumptions made there, but that's just kind of brief sort of summary, really. The other thing that I wanted to say was about the use of guest speakers. Guest speakers can be really, really useful in fatherhood forums, and certainly in fatherhood forums and parent groups. I've done quite a lot of guest talks as a way of getting people to discuss the topics that they might be, and the experiences that might be having, and to discuss sort of things that are happening in the news, for example, or something more topical. Also sharing stories is really sort of key. So sharing really positive stories as well, to highlight what the actual organisation can do to support fathers. It's not all about just parting on the negative things, but also about talking about stories of dads who've really made it work, how they've made it work, and sort of feeding that back to the other people in that group so they can talk to their managers about more flexibility or whatever that might be. I did have a few more slides, but I'll hand over to Elliott now, because I think Elliott will cover them. But there are some slides there if you want to read a little bit more. Most of them are sort of directly taken from my book, so it felt like too much of a plug, really, just to sort of talk through that. But it is there if you do want to look at it a bit more. Elliott, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really good to see some familiar faces in the audience that I know. Hi, Scott. Hi, Ellen. And yeah, thank you for the invite to kind of come and share some of my experience with you. So my name is Elliott Ray, and I talk about fatherhood a lot, actually. I spend a lot of my time talking about fatherhood and parenting. I have a daughter myself. She's 7 years old. And yeah, becoming a dad 7.5 years ago changed my life in many ways, as it does for many parents. And, you know, our kind of experiences led me to think a lot about how we support dads, working dads and dads in general, and what we can do as peers, as colleagues, but also how we can kind of adapt and amend some of the systems and processes and groups and support community groups that we have across society and in the workplace to better support dads. And I think Jasmine did a really good kind of overview of why that is so important. So I want to talk to you about kind of how we make that happen. So I'm the founder of a parenting platform called Music Football Fatherhood. They're the three things that I love. And we do a lot of collaborations with football clubs. We have a big event with Watford Football Club coming up the day before Father's Day. We work with Arsenal and QPR. We do content, podcasts, etc. I also worked in diversity inclusion in the civil service. My last job was as head of D&I in the Treasury. I've created a book called Dad, which is on the left-hand side there. Presented a BBC documentary, and also work a lot with parenting and fatherhood networks across different industries: higher education, law, accountancy, insurance, finance, in the charity sector as well. And also back in the day, started a family network in Department for Transport too. So I want to share with you a few of my kind of thoughts of what I've learned working with parenting networks and sharing one myself. And I think, first of all, just to say that, you know, as Jasmine said, these networks and community groups can be transformative. And I can't really emphasize the importance of safe spaces for all of us, in this instance, fathers, to share, to get support, to talk about some of the challenges, to hear some good news, to share best practice. Like, this is what we need. I think we've come to a place in society, yeah, where we have better policies in some organizations, where we have evolved and we are evolving what it means to be a man and what it means to be a dad. But I think the space to connect with other dads who are going through similar experiences is so, so powerful. Some of the best moments I've had in my life have been where we have got men together to share from a really open place around some very sensitive topics. You know, talk about loss, talk about co-parenting, talk about miscarriage, you know, all those sort of things. If we can create space for people to do that, it's really, really powerful. So first of all, I want to talk about a very exciting topic: governance. And I want to quickly touch on one of the main issues that I think parent networks and chairs of networks in general find difficult. And that is largely around time and acknowledgement. So I'd really encourage you, when you're thinking about your fatherhood forums and networks, to try and make it part of the formal process of what is going on in your organization. So you'll have a D&I team, an HR team. Hopefully you'll have networks for race and gender and, you know, disability, etc. if you can plug into that system, that is really important. I think doing that, hopefully, or if you have an organization that has this in place, can allow facility time for the chair. And that means, for example, if you can have 5% of your job, 10% if you're pushing it, dedicated to the network activities, that will go so far in, first of all, encouraging and recruiting a good chair, but also allowing that chair and that network lead to be effective in their job. The other part of being in the formal setup is acknowledgement. So I find with chairs of networks, they have busy day jobs and it's very hard to find the time, but we find the time because we're passionate about it. And if we don't have allocated facility time, acknowledgement and the network activities included in your objectives is very important, very key. It's very important for all chairs, but especially when it comes to men and those ideas about masculinity. We know that men, number one reason men don't take paternity leave is because they think it might negatively impact their career. We know that women do the vast majority of D&I activities in the workplace. So to help to kind of overcome some of those ideas about manhood and masculinity and getting involved in these things, having recognition attached to the role of the chair is very important too. So please do consider those two things. In regards to what a network can achieve, I think there's 4 things that the network can really achieve in terms of fatherhood forums. And I'm going to talk through each of those and kind of some examples of how they can be impactful. So the first one, as Jasmine said, is around support. So some really good examples that we've seen is where fatherhood networks can run monthly open sessions on Zoom or maybe face-to-face or MS Teams, however you decide to do it. And these can be kind of open forums with a guest speaker, with some breakout groups if possible, but themed around specific topics. So topics around postnatal depression, maybe one around miscarriage, co-parenting, parenting a child with autism. The list goes on, and don't be scared to repeat topics as well. But having those kind of themed safe space sessions is really important. Thinking about how we advertise that session, inclusive language, making sure they don't have to be just for fathers, but make sure they are targeted towards fathers is really important. The Samaritans did some research actually around how to engage men in health services. And one of the big things they came out is that men are more likely to engage when they know that that session and the initiative directly talks to them and directly meets their needs. So in advertising these sessions, be really explicit about this is sessions for dads, and we're going to talk about some of the issues that men and dads face. They can be so powerful. When you get men together, there's the stereotype that men don't talk. And yeah, I kind of agree with that in some form. But what I have seen is if we get the environment right, if we get a strong facilitator, if we get the communications right, if we set the environment where people can come in a non-judgmental way, men will talk and dads will talk, and they will share some of the deepest and hardest parts of their life with the audience and with their peers. And the support from other people can be life-changing and transformative to how they think about being a dad, but also how much they feel like they belong to the organization and how they engage with the organization as well. So support is the number one thing. I think these networks can be so important for offering that. Second of all, I think is encouragement. Jasmine spoke about role models, spoke about the need that we need more men to embrace flexible working, to take the full allocation of paternity leave, whatever is offered in that organization. These are things that are important to the dads themselves. They are important to gender equity. They're important to mothers' experiences. They are important to the development of our children. I think when it comes to the resistance to taking up these offers of flexible working and paternity leave, a lot of it can be the result of stigma. It can be the result of this is not the manly thing to do. It can be the result of generations of seeing men in their family parenting in a certain way. We can use fatherhood forums and networks to amplify role models, to share positive stories, and to encourage men to work flexibly, to put in that flexible working request, encourage men to take on that full parental leave offer. I was doing a talk at a big law firm earlier on this year, one of the big Magic Circle law firms, and it was really interesting. We had a panel discussion, and there was a guy there who was, he was associate kind of middle management level, and he had just come back from 3 months off paid paternity leave. And he said that number one reason he decided to take that offer was because he was in the parenting group at work, and a senior member of staff talked about his experience of coming back from paternity leave, how good it was for his the bond with his baby, but also how much the organization supported him. And the job was there when he came back, and he had some support in returning back into work, keeping in touch days, etc. And he said it was a really good experience for him and his family and his work. And that encouraged that kind of staff member to then go and take the 3 months paid. So we can use these fatherhood forums and these networks to amplify the role models, to showcase those good practices, to talk about the policies that are available, and encourage dads to think differently and take up the flexible working, parental leave, and other family-friendly policies that are available. The third thing I think that the networks can do, and this is when you have a really mature network, is accountability. And it does take a level of trust to get there. But in our events that we do with Music Football Fatherhood, we do online sessions on Zoom on a monthly basis. We do collaborations with football clubs. Because a lot of the dads that come, they kind of get to know each other. They understand it's a safe space. They understand we mean the best and we're there to support and encourage. We can actually start to hold each other to account. And when I talk about holding each other to account, it's about challenging in a safe way that encourages people to think differently, and really kind of shifts thinking. And if you have a mature network with trusted facilitators, with people that have been coming along for a few months now, that know each other, that have seen the benefit of the network, you'll start to encourage accountability. And I think that is really important. And that's really how we get to shifting culture and shifting beliefs and perceptions. It can be difficult to do, but I think if you stick with it and you create a mature network, you'll get to that point where you can eventually have accountability in that space, which is really, really powerful. And I think the fourth thing that we can do as a fatherhood network is gather voices, gather insight and qualitative data and quantitative data as well, and report that back into HR, report that back into the leadership, and talk about the things that dads need. I want to give an example, and this is in the public, so I think I'm okay to share this, but I was working with JP Morgan, the bank, a few weeks ago, and you may have seen on social media, on LinkedIn, and on the news, that there was a recent communication in JP Morgan that said that all MDs need to be in the office 5 days a week, and all other staff members need to be in the office 3 days a week, and that's kind of largely non-negotiable. So we were doing a session the day after some of that communication kind of came out, and there was a big conversation going on around what this means for everybody, but especially the working parents who have designed their life since COVID in a way where they need to be there for pickup now. They have responsibilities, childcare responsibilities, they have a dog, etc. And it's a difficult message to land. A lot of people, were very upset. Before the session, which was around how we support working dads, how we look at the evolution of masculinity, how we encourage dads to parent loudly and parent out loud, we did a pre-event survey on Slido. Just asked people 3 or 4 questions. One of the questions was, does JP Morgan support dads to be active parents? And what can be done differently to support dads better? We had over 100 responses in that anonymous survey. And a lot of it was, dads and mums talking about the fact that we need more role models. We need to have nuance in the flexible working policy, and all different things that dads were saying that they needed, and mums that what we needed. And that was a great session in itself. And the chairs of the network used that data, used the recording of the session and some of the outputs from the actual session, and are going back to HR to say, look, this is what people in the organization think, this is what we need, and this is how you can support dads to be more active and engaged, and this is what it means for the organization in regards to recruitment, retention, well-being, engagement, etc. So the network can play a massive part in gathering voices, getting that information. What are people thinking in the organization? And then how do you kind of report that back to HR to hopefully influence leadership and influence policies going forward as well. So I'm going to give kind of an overview of some of the things that I think are really important in making a fatherhood network successful. I think the first thing is around communications, and I touched on this briefly before as well. That fact that the Samaritan research shows us that men are more likely to engage in services that are directly meeting their needs. And I think there is definitely space for a parents and carers network and dads to be involved in that 100%. But I'd always encourage a subgroup, a specific fatherhood subgroup underneath that. I think when you have that in place, dads are much more likely to engage. They see people who have similar experiences. They see the leadership. They see the people who are putting it on and facilitating the conversations. They see that the organization is prioritizing things that are important to them. And in turn, they are more likely to spend their time going along to events and engaging in the content, and even hopefully being part of the executive team that's going to run the network as well. I think a senior champion is so important, you know, someone at board level who is a fatherhood champion for the organization, someone that is parent loudly, can champion the evolution of policies, that will blog about their parenting experience, that will support the fatherhood network and chairs with resource and will acknowledge the work they are doing, who hopefully put some money behind the activities, who will open events when you have guest speakers or you have your monthly online kind of informal sessions. You know, someone who is senior, who gains the respect of the organization, is so impactful and so powerful for the success. And I think lastly is, don't be scared to challenge gender norms. Don't be scared to be progressive. Don't be scared to champion positive masculinity. There are dads in your organization that want that conversation. There are people that want to engage in a conversation that is outside of the norm that they are having, they are not having at home, they're not having with their friendship groups. Don't be scared to touch on those difficult conversations. Don't be scared to talk to people about why this is important for themselves, for their partners, for their families, for their children, for the organization, and really be brave in the activities that you're doing. Sometimes you might need help and support in doing that with guest speakers and experts that can come in, but start from the position of, you know, we want to do something that helps to evolve the idea of what it means to be a dad in the organization. And I think if you start from that position, you will attract the right people in. You will find your tribe, and from there things will kind of grow, and you will do things that can really change people's lives. So I hope that's been helpful. I'm not sure if we're having a Q&A or not. I mean, I can hang around for a little bit, but Mark, I'll hand it back to you to go forward.
Thanks so much, Elliott. That's been terrific, and Jasmine as well. A really wonderful overview of what we're hoping to kind of encourage networks to do. We do have some time for a bit of a Q&A, and I just wanted to say we're going to have like a 5-minute comfort break, so you can go and get a drink and just refresh before we get into the next section with Kelechi. But does anyone have any particular questions that would like to ask? I have a couple of questions I can get started with. But if anyone would like to ask anything in particular. We did have a question earlier regarding men as carers. I don't know, Elliott, if you've encountered that at all in terms of the dads networks, and if we've had some like maybe parent carers or that their kind of engagement. I don't know if that's something you encountered.
Yeah, sure. And I think dads and men who are carers will encounter some of the same issues as well. You know, we know that men are less likely to have their flexible working requests approved. I think that's due to bias in a decision-making process, individuals who have an idea about who does caring, and that comes out in who they kind of accept in regards to flexibility. So I think it is really important to include those people, whether it's in the fatherhood forum, which can work, or whether that's within a wider parents and carers network. But I think, you know, it is important to recognize intersectionality where it exists, but also recognize that there will be unique challenges that people have, and how do we make space for those conversations for those people. So yeah, I think it's about including carers within the work that you're doing around men and dads, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's definite crossover with some of that kind of the forfeit and the stigma piece. I think that's certainly what I've been picking up from some of our interviews. So I think that there's definitely a place for reaching out in the same way, but perhaps tailoring it differently.
I'd imagine there'd be some specific sessions for carers that might be more useful.
Yeah.
It might be, for example, about sort of getting PIP or particular kind of access to support. So it might be that if you have guest speakers, for example, they might be particularly pertinent to the carers network, but quite often there'll be joint events that would be really pertinent to both, I would have thought.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. We have got a couple of additional questions. We've got one from Fajakovic regarding, so what does a good facilitator look like? What qualities do they have?
Yeah, that is a very, very good question, and there's a lot to it. I think someone who can hold the respect of the group, and that maybe for different reasons. Maybe it is because of their personal story, maybe it's because of their seniority, maybe it's because of their relationships, but I think someone who can hold that space and has the respect of their peers, I think helps, definitely. And that respect can be earned as well. But I think if they are coming in with that just helps people to feel like, okay, this is somewhere that I want to be because that person is going to be facilitating it. So it's a really good starting point, if possible. I think also someone who understands the issues to a certain extent. So you're not going to get one person that has personal experience in every element of fatherhood. I don't think, and that would be pretty amazing if they did. But someone who has some personal experience that they are, and we all have personal experience, but personal experience that they're willing to share and willing to be vulnerable and open about. When I do my sessions, if I'm going into an organization, I'll always start by sharing my personal story. I think that just helps people to understand where you're coming from, but also sets the tone for the conversation, the level of vulnerability that you want to achieve. So I think that is really important. I think thirdly, facilitation is a skill within itself. So there are things that you can do, whether it's online or in person, to create a good environment. For example, if it's in person, thinking about what the room looks like, is there natural light? How is the chair set up? What's the temperature? Do you have music playing as people come in? How are they greeted as people come in? How are you using resources to spark a conversation? How do you get people talking early? If they talk early, they're more likely to talk throughout a session. People learn in different ways. Some people like data, some people like personal stories, some people like visuals, having a mixture of that where possible, making sure people can partake in group work, but also for people who don't like that, can participate in more one-to-one or pair sessions. So someone who can think about that. It's not possible to do a perfect session all the time, and you don't need to, but at least a facilitator or a team who can think about what is possible within the resource that you have. So all that might sound daunting, but I would definitely say, just start. Don't worry about making it perfect at all. Starting is the most important thing, and trying your best to kind of iterate and get better as you go along.
And I think learning from the wonderful chairs that are out there at the moment, I would count you as one of those. So I think sharing what you've done, and hopefully men will follow. I think we've got some really good questions coming in. We've got Clemence, who is asking, have you seen deterioration since COVID in the quality of conversation on dads and parents in the workplace? So I think she was referring to that, the bank and the return to the office mood music that sort of suggested that shift away from that kind of, we heard a bit about the kind of good enough is good enough narrative that came out during COVID, and that shift back to let's return to the office and back to business as usual. I don't know if that's come up for either Jasmine or Elliott in terms of what you've encountered.
I think certainly during COVID there was lots of talk about sort of change working patterns, and I think there's still a fair bit of sort of rhetoric around that. I'm not sure that we have really seen the sea change that we hoped, and I think a lot of us who were researching during that time were really hoping to see a real change in this space. And certainly I did quite a lot of interviews during COVID, and there was lots of dads I was speaking to really sort of saying, I never want to go back to how things were. And I think there has been quite a lot of informal flexibility moving forward. I'm not sure that we've really seen that formality that we might have hoped for. And I think the challenge with that is when companies are sort of saying, well, actually, no longer the hybrid thing's working for us, we want you to come to the office. I think many people are in that situation when they're a little bit like sort of saying, actually, nothing's been formalized. I do school run now 3 days a week. I really like doing that, but I'm doing that on an informal basis. And so now they're going to go back to the office. You wonder whether we'll see more formality in people's working arrangements. Because I think there's a real desire from the people that I've speak to kind of during COVID, sort of post-COVID and interviews that I've been involved in. I think there's a real desire, but I'm not sure there's been a real change in actual organisational practices. But anyone on the call, feel free to fight me back on that. But that's kind of my personal view.
Thanks for that, Jasmine. I think I know Clemence has done work around policy, and that's kind of, it leads on to that question about ensuring that there's parity, and others have commented on the kind of line manager lottery as well in terms of how people are supported. So I think that's, I don't know if you've encountered any good policy initiatives in this area. I think, yeah, that I'm very conscious of the line manager lottery, certainly in my research as well. Oh, Madiha, you've got your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Yes. Sorry, I had to absent myself for a while. I just wanted to quickly build on that point by saying that there is a lot of, it's a window of opportunity actually for the line managers and universities indeed to be able to provide that skill set and that confidence to line managers that they can actually look after their staff members and their teams who have caring responsibilities, whether that's parental responsibilities or whether that's caring responsibilities. There is definitely an onus on the university leadership to be able to provide those lines of support. I just wanted to re-endorse on that point. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you. The only other point I just wanted to raise before I give people a comfort break is there's a lot of appreciation for the parenting loudly. I think that's a really good point, and having role modeling as a big part of your role in as a facilitator, but also returning to work. I think it's very important for men especially. I don't know if there's any other comments you wanted to make on that point, Elliott or Jasmine.
I think just parenting loudly is putting your school pickup in your calendar.
Yeah.
It's putting your childcare activities in your out of office. It is refusing meetings because you have to do the pickup, or saying, can we do the meeting in school hours, and being loud about that. We've seen dads who have put off-site meetings in their calendar rather than just say they're going to do the school pickup. Yeah. So I think that's what parent loudly is, and it's being proud to ask for flexible working because you need to look after your kids, and doing that loudly and letting people know that you're a dad, you have that responsibility, you're proud of it, and it's a factor in your decision making. I think once we see that, when we see that happening, that's when we know we've done the culture change work, and it's kind of working when dads are doing that. So it's a good kind of measurement of how far we've come, I think.
And I think
just to come in on that, Elliott, I just wanted, sorry to talk you much, but just particularly for senior members in the organisation, I think that's so important. I think if you're quite a junior member of staff, it's really hard to do that. Whereas if you see your boss doing it or the senior exec team doing it, then that's going to give people the confidence to say, actually, I'm doing that as well, but I've been hiding it for the last 2 years. But now I'm going to say, my boss is saying that, I'm going to say, I'm going to admit that that's what I'm doing as well, because lots of people are doing it, but I worry that it's still quite underground.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make, Jasmine. Great minds. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that having the kind of permission from someone in a higher position, someone who has that kind of long-standing within an organisation, I think it gives everyone else that feeling that it's okay, that culture is there. So no, totally agree. Right. I'm conscious that people need to have a little bit of space just to step away, perhaps have a bit of comfort break, a drink, or whatever it is. What I would like to say first of all is thank you so much, Jasmine and Elliott, for your wonderful talks and for being part of this and of the Q&A. Really encourage you to seek out both their books. I think there's some incredible research that Jasmine has done, and also Dad is a wonderful resource. I'm personally in Northumbria University hoping to use that alongside a couple of other books as a resource for Dad's group. So and it kind of, when we was talking about topics especially, there's some really valuable topic discussions that could be nice prompts for sessions with Dad's Network. So I really would recommend that. But, the resources out there, but we need to look for it and use it, I would say. So thank you so much, both of you. We have a brilliant session joining with Kelechi now, so thank you, Elliott. And we are going to be speaking about carers next, so please do just take a moment just to step away from the screen. I know I need to step away from the screen sometimes, so and then please return. We'll resume in just about 1:10, please. So just have a couple of minutes and then we'll resume with Kelechi. Ready to go?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm really delighted to have been invited to this session today. My full job title is Carer, is Faculty Equality and Diversity Officer, and I'm the Carers Project Lead, which is an offshoot from our university's For Families project. So a lot of my presentation will be around that role, what it involved leading that project, how it started, and things that we have learned from the project. A bit of my background also involves 15 years of work with carer support agencies before joining higher education. So I worked with carers in the voluntary sector, as well as in adult social care, as well, and also carers in employment as part of the wider public sector setup. So next slide, please. And the next one. So I'm going to kind of be talking to you about the business case. But before then, I would like us to participate in an exercise, which is a poll, which Anna has kindly put together for us. So we're going to see who's in the room today. So we have a few questions and we want you to answer either yes, sometimes, or no. And these are various routines and tasks that people do from day to day. So for the first one, driving, people that live with you to the GP, hospital, or other allied medical appointments. So it's a single choice poll. So if you could respond to this and then submit your answer. There are 10 questions altogether. Should only take a few minutes.
So I'm completing it as well, Kelechi, to get a sense of the time. So it's a really valuable exercise, this really an eye-opener, I would say, for most people.
Mm.
I think we should have had enough time now, I think, to get a sense of what people in the room are feeling about these questions. And then we can, I think, Anna, when you're ready, you can share some of the kind of anonymous results for that. Mm.
Right. Very interesting. So we can see that nearly every question has a yes or sometimes, which is the response that we are really interested in. Nearly every question. So what it says to me is that majority of people on this webinar are carers. And if I had given you the definition of carer, you'll probably say, no, I'm not a carer. But from doing this simple exercise, it goes to show that majority of us in this room, there are carers in this room. So that's just the purpose of this exercise. Anybody that does any of those tasks is considered a carer. But if you said no to all the questions, then you're not a carer. If you have yes or sometimes. So that brings me to talking about this project and what it was all about. Our Carers project began as an offshoot from the Parenting and Childcare project, which was part of our action plan for our Athena Swan Institutional Silver Award. And looking at the project meant that we had to look at childcare provision and childcare support within the university, which wasn't very brilliant. And in the course of that project, we've realized that it's highlighted the unique needs of carers. And these unique needs stemmed from the fact that focus group discussions led to us finding out that caring responsibilities for younger dependents don't come to an end as for carers, even when the dependent reaches the age of 18. The other thing that stood out as well was that people cared for people at different, colleagues cared for people at different stages of their illnesses and disability, which present varying challenges to individuals at various times. It also showed that we had a presence of diverse group of carers within our university as a community, as a global employer as well. People come to work for us from different parts of the world. And I would imagine that will be the same for every university in the UK. And it also showed us the unpredictable nature of caring and the fast changing situations that sometimes accompany this. So this led to the university's executive board requesting for a self-assessment of our university, looking at what we currently have in place and what we don't do well. And I was asked to do this self-assessment because I was the only one within the university who kind of had that sort of knowledge to be able to do that. Next slide, please. So this led to the self-assessment. I will show you in another slide what came out, what came out of that self-assessment. But the whole issue about caring hinges on identity and recognition. What we've done there is an recognition exercise. So there are 4 key questions I always ask. What is the difference between identity and recognition? Are they the same? Are they one of the same? Are they 2 separate things? And who is responsible for each? And how are they related? And what can this knowledge help us to achieve as an organization? So looking at identity, we are talking of identifying somebody as a carer. Recognition is about the carer recognizing first that they have caring responsibilities. And if you don't recognize yourself, you are unlikely to be identified. So the onus is on the carer to recognize, but also another person very close to the carer can recognize from conversations that this person is a carer because of the kind of information the person shares with them, and then being able to enable them identify that they are carers to the universities or through the systems within the university, which enables them to actualize the benefits from that identification. So we can see that these 2 words sometimes are used interchangeably, but they are not exactly the same. They are related because you have to recognize first before you are identified. And what does it help the organization to achieve? I think it helps us to maximize opportunities for identification, because at the point of recruitment, are we asking people the carer question as part of our diversity monitoring? Do you have caring responsibilities? People might avoid answering that because they think they might not get the job if they did. But, think of it as a disability question. If you disclose your disability, you get support. But if you don't disclose your caring role, you don't get support. So any organization that is asking you that shows that they are aspiring to become carer positive. So it can also be an opportunity. Another opportunity for the organization is when people have gone on sickness absence leave and return to work. What do we ask them when they come back? Is the sickness as a result of a disability? It could be a new disability, but we could also ask, is the sickness as a result of a new caring responsibility, which we didn't know before? So that will enable us, encourage the person to recognize and identify. And also during one-to-one, one of the key questions should be, how are you? It's not a lot to ask people, how are you? It's a simple question, but it could evoke a lot of discussions about what the person's been doing at the weekend, how they've their mom had a fall, or how they've done shopping. You can pick up cues from that question that somebody is gradually becoming a carer, or even how's your family, and let it be down to the person to, you know, either respond comprehensively or just have a short answer. Next slide, please. So the next slide presents to us the standard definition of carer. This is what the NHS uses. And they tell us that a carer is someone of any background who without payment provides support to another person who could not manage without their help. And it tells us the list of problems the individual might have in order to qualify as the cared for. And the key words there is around the payment. And this is the kind of carer we are focusing on. A carer is unpaid to qualify as the kind of carer we are talking about. We have foster carers. They are paid, so they are not necessarily part of it. Another slide I'll be going through will show us the different types of caring situations that people get involved in. And you can see in that last sentence that I circled, there is a huge stigma associated with caring for somebody who's older, or caring for somebody who's got mental illness, or somebody with disability, certain types of illnesses or addiction issues. And that might make it impossible for people to actually agree that they are carers, which is why the checklist of using tasks is a much better way of doing it. And that's what I really want to drive home using this slide. So there is a move away from, you know, using that carer definition. So the next thing we're going to look at is barriers and pitfalls. And this is mainly, you can click on the whole, this is mainly arising from that that use of definitions. The pitfall of the definition is that some people refuse to say that they've got caring responsibilities. And this is because of these 9 things. When you think about parental position, okay, let me even begin with our universities being global employers. People come from different parts of the world, and in the various parts of the world, the first son or the first daughter in the family carries, being in those positions, carry a lot of responsibilities. For example, I'm the first daughter of my family, but before anything is done at home, I have to give consent, I have to authorize. So people are working for us, but they are still tied to their families in their various countries, including caring roles related to those positions. So that's one thing to think about. And in many countries or in many languages, there is no word for carer. My language certainly doesn't have a word, carer. So sometimes, again, that prevents people from identifying that they have caring responsibilities. Parental position is a big one. When you perceive your caring role for a chronically ill person or disabled child as part of parental responsibility and your day-to-day duty, you are unlikely to admit that you are a carer. Then the second one, sandwich situation. When we look at the census, which is now a long time ago, 2011 was the last results that we had. 2.4 million people in this country told us that they had a sandwich caring situation. And that is when you are caring for a young family, as well as older people who have disabilities or chronic illnesses. Because you are juggling these two, as well as working, you are in a sandwich situation. Some people kind of feel very reluctant to admit that. And it makes it difficult for them to see themselves as carers because of the presence of the young children, especially in academia, where a lot of women get onto the career ladder at a very, at an older age, because they are, when a lot of women are busy focusing on their career and choose to have children at an older age, they end up in a sandwich situation where at the time their children are growing, they're hands-on parents. They also have elderly parents that they look after. The third one is the mutual position, where carers are in a marriage or civil partnership and believe that caring for each other is part of the fulfillment of their marriage vows, and so doesn't count as caring. Another mindset is dealing with colleagues or students from cultural backgrounds, where, especially Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, where caring is limited to certain members of the family, the females especially, where being a good daughter-in-law or a good wife means that you've got to care for elderly relatives. It could make it difficult for people to admit that they are carers. Then you have the stigma side of it, which is one associated with caring for a family or friend or relative with addiction issues or an illness that carries with it stigma like mental illness or HIV might make it very difficult for somebody to admit that they've got caring responsibilities. Then we have the masculinity issues, especially when it comes to male carers. Sometimes this creates a situation where men struggle with the idea of what being a carer means for their masculinity. So they kind of avoid using that title for their caring roles. Then we have the relationship side of it. We have, we have the relationship side of it, where people see themselves as the wife, the husband. That's what we should do for each other. It's not a big deal. I don't want to be to be known as a carer. I'm just the husband or the wife or the mother or whatever, brother or sister. Then the sexual orientation side of it is one that we don't often think about. There are colleagues in our organizations who are not out at work. Because they are not out at work, they don't admit to being lesbian or gay or bisexual, and for fear of admitting that they are caring for a same-sex partner, they won't tell us that they have caring responsibilities. And the last one is kinship situation, where we have grandparents who look after grandchildren on behalf of their children who have mental illness or addiction issues. We'll have colleagues in that situation who are standing in for an absent parent, where the parent is absent because of an illness or addiction issues. And often they will not admit to us that they have caring responsibilities. So these are the barriers and pitfalls of that definition, which we need to kind of think more broadly about. So let's move on to the next slide. So we have circumvented the definition to boost recognition. Our Carers Network has provided those pop-up banners, which has a list of all the tasks, possible tasks and responsibilities that carers have. So when you come to our event and if we have a stall and you come to our stall and think you are not a carer, we'll direct you to the pop-up banner with all the tasks. And if you can do one thing there or two or more, then you are a carer. We signpost you to whatever the university offers. So the trick is about using that checklist, being upfront, and sharing the benefits within the carers policy, which they can't access unless they identify and sign up to being a carer. And it allows us as an organization to be accountable in terms of what leave we are offering people and the justification that they are entitled to that leave because they've identified themselves as carers. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the Carers Passport. So the Carers Passport it's actually a government document, and we introduced it when we launched our standalone carers policy, because the Parenting and Childcare Project, which is now called the Family for Families Project, decided that carers will have to have a separate policies because of their unique need. For this reason, we introduced the Carers Passport as part of that policy. So I'll go through it briefly, telling you what it is, when it is completed, who completes it and gets to keep it, and how it's used or maintained. So it is a documentation that we use, which is designed to support the carer, and which is designed to support discussions that the carer has had with their line manager. The idea is to help open a chat about the carer's caring responsibilities and what can be done at work to support that individual. So technically everybody involved in that conversation should be willing to consider all possible options that will deliver a happy compromise as part of that conversation. So what is in it? What we use the carer passport to capture is current caring responsibilities of the individual and how their caring responsibilities impact on work. How does work impact on the person's caring responsibilities? And what support is already in place for that individual? What additional support might be helpful for the individual? And also thoughts about contingency plan at work, should they have an emergency, which often happens in several caring roles. So when is it completed? I would say the best time to complete it is as soon as caring commences, as soon as somebody identifies as a carer, but some people don't complete it until they have a crisis situation. At that time, it's very difficult to put things in place without disrupting the whole function of the team. So it's better to not to think that it's too early to complete it. And I think we should encourage colleagues to complete it from the outset of assuming a caring responsibility. The person should work with their line manager to keep their passport up to date. And remember recording, we must remember recording the agreements. And it doesn't mean that they will never change, because as the caring responsibilities changes, it needs to be reviewed, and then the agreements change as well. Who completes it and who gets to keep it. So before we talk about who completes it and who gets to keep it, we must ensure that whatever we write in the carer's passport has a date to it. And the date means that we are keeping record of the pace of change and when things have changed. And it allows us to track back the record to see what we've done with that individual. So who gets to complete it, I think, and who gets to keep it? The most important thing to bear in mind in relation to this is that the document will remain confidential between the carer and their line manager, unless the carer wants it to be shared more widely. So this is the reason why we need to ask the carer at that point, do you want anyone else to see this? It could be an illness that is very personal and they don't want anybody to see it. And at this point, we need to think about the data protection impact assessment for that document, because it could lead to breach of confidentiality. And we need to think more broadly about the data protection elements. So how is it used and maintained? In summary, the discussions around the carer's passports will, because it contains caring responsibilities, how the employer can help, agreed actions and next review meeting, dates that carers leave was agreed for that individual, all the sequence of dates, whether they were agreed in hours or short-term leave or leave in dates, it needs to be documented and with the colleagues and line manager's signature. That is the whole maintenance process for that document. So that's the carer's passport in a nutshell. So looking at the next slide, we need to consider certain things. How do we incorporate this element in the carer training, managers training, when new managers have been promoted or when a manager is coming in post? We need to think about incorporating the training, which is what we are trying to do at Newcastle. Managers handover communication. If a new manager is coming in, it's important to decide with the carer what they want to what their previous manager wants them to hand over, and whether they are happy for it to be handed over to the new manager. I've mentioned data impact, privacy impact analysis, and also new starter induction materials. The carer's passport should be part and parcel of this, so that even the new starter knows that it exists outside the identification process. Next slide, please. So the next slide that gives me an opportunity to share my experience about my involvement in leading the Carers project. The next slide, please. I'll just share briefly with you what it involved. In a nutshell, I talked about the initial self-assessment based on 5 key principles, which I'll share with you later. I then wrote a very detailed report to the University Executive Board, arguing a business case after they saw the self-assessment document and found out that we had a lot of gaps in supporting carers. Then the third thing I did was, because of the uniqueness of carers and the statistical realities around an aging workforce, I tried to ensure that that argument beefed up my business case. And that is based on the fact that Carers UK research show that the peak age of caring is between 45 and 66. That is when a lot of employees are in active caring responsibility, have active caring responsibilities. And what does this mean for an organization? It means that the most experienced members of your workforce are carers. If they are not supported, they are likely to leave. And they leave with all the experience they have and all the training you've given them. And what is the outcome? It means that you are recruiting more people, spending money on recruitment and spending money on training new people. So it makes absolute business sense to support carers. So I then set up a steering group. The steering group comprised of key stakeholders within the university and also stakeholders outside of the university. I had somebody from the city council and somebody from the local carer agency, and a university, an academic who was a carer, who was retired at the time, but we wanted her to join so that she could see what we were doing compared with how things used to be. I had people from the estates department, student services, and various, I couldn't tell you on what was quite a large steering group. Then I conducted a university-wide carer survey. It was the first ever carer survey, and it was targeted at both staff and students. Everything about this project was targeted at both staff and students. So the survey was launched in February of 2018. It was open for 6 weeks. The response rate wasn't fantastic, but I felt that the people who responded were people who were really interested and people who identify themselves as carers. Out of that survey, we had 3 focus groups to explore emerging themes. The focus groups were for all academic and research staff, professional services staff, then all groups of all levels of students, undergraduates, PGT&R, and we don't have foundation students. So we've got a lot of emerging themes from those focus groups, and we joined this together with the findings from the survey and published an executive summary of recommendations and everything we found from the project. I need to point out that the focus group was facilitated by an external provider because we felt it would give people an opportunity to be open and honest about their views. And she also wrote up the executive summary. And in the end, everything in the recommendation was implemented through the For Families project, so that I had the support to make sure that they happened. Next slide, please. So this is quickly the 5 principles that I used for the self-assessment. I looked at how well we identify carers, the policy considerations. We didn't have any policies, practical support. We didn't have any staff networks. We had in our HR policies, didn't really mention unpaid carers. It mentioned parent carers. So there were lots and lots of gaps. Communication and awareness was non-existent. We had nothing telling people if you're a carer, tell somebody or seek support here or there. And there was no peer support network. Then the next slide are the key findings from both the research and the survey and the focus groups. We needed to raise awareness. Disclosure was an issue. There was no channel for disclosure or identification of carers. We had no information or training that managers or staff could access. Advice and support was non-existent, and carers didn't have a unified voice to talk about issues that affect them. And the last slide there is around the current status to date. What have we achieved? One of the recommendations in my report to the University Executive Board was for the university to become a member of Employer for Carers. Employer for Carers is a business network run by Carers UK. It has 230 members, and there are only 4 university members. It's highly recommended for any university to join this. It comes with a fee, but when you think of the resources that it provides, it's incomparable with anything you will get anywhere. We also set up a carers network. We have a network for colleagues and PGRs, because PGRs are also classed as staff in a way, so their issues will be similar, and a virtual network for undergraduates and PGT students. We also currently we have a temporary identification process where people tell their line managers that they have a caring responsibility. It's just because the reporting system, which is my app, they are still working on it so that to enable people to do it electronically. It's not ready yet, but in the meantime, we are trying to do it in an alternative way. So what came out of that again is a standalone carers policy, which includes the carers passport that I talked about, and a very comprehensive managers guidance that will allow managers to implement the policy. We also carried a very comprehensive and robust equality analysis on the carers policy, which will be reviewed from time to time. And carers are now represented on our equality and diversity consultative group, and every consultation in relation to equality analysis on various other policies involve carers. So carers now have that voice on any decision making table. And that's it. I may have overrun by a little time, but yeah. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
A lot of enthusiasm, Kelechi, for what you've been talking about. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm in awe of what you have done at Newcastle, so I'm sure others probably feel exactly the same. From what I've picked up in the chat, people are very interested in the checklist. If it's possible to share that, we can facilitate that if you're happy to do so.
That's fine. Yeah.
And similarly, I think there was questions about the your report as well. I don't know how, I mean, obviously there's some element of that which is specific to Newcastle University, but if there's some part of it you're happy to share, people are interested in that, I think, to perhaps use it as a model for what they can do as well.
That's fine.
And I think the link as well for the employer for carers. So is that, am I right?
Employer for carers, yes.
Yeah.
It's a business forum.
Yeah, that would be, I think we can try and share that as well, just so others can kind of seek that out, because it is, when you've talked to me about it, it's just it sounds like an immensely useful resource, and it kind of signals to your employers and to employees how much caring is valued in the organization, and it gives people the tools to actually make their working lives a lot more manageable as well, and for managers as well to help support their staff. Does anyone have any, we have a question here from Clemence. What are the benefits of a carers only network as opposed to a parents and carers network? It's a good question.
Yeah, from the Newcastle perspective, we have a totally separate parents network and we have a separate carers network, and we've kept it that way because sometimes the needs can be quite conflicting. and it could create friction in relationships between the two groups, because carers are looking, parents look after well children, but carers look after children who are unwell or whose conditions will not change even when they become 18. So sometimes such conflicting needs could create friction, and that is why we've kept the two groups separate.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges, I think, of having integrated, is to try and recognize that difference. And I think one of the things that one of our project group members, Chris Whiting, spoke about was in terms of who leads these networks. Sometimes it's helpful to seek out people who have had caring experience and perhaps sadly are no longer doing it, but have actually understand what it means to be a carer and perhaps have a bit more capacity than they did have to perhaps chair and lead some of these groups, because I think that's one of the real challenges, is just the time that people don't have to, but knowing how useful they are to have that community. So it's a real kind of issue to overcome. Yeah, I think that's the comment that's been made here actually by Kate Lever, in terms of the engagement, trying to get them engaged. So I think what's been discussed here has been really, really useful for Kelechi. I knew it would be, because it's a huge fan of what you've done.
I can't say that the situation is different in terms of engagement. It's very difficult to engage carers. I mean, we've been without a chair for over 6 months.
Yeah.
It was our chair and co-chair. Our chair left for a new job, and our co-chair stepped down because of increasing caring responsibilities. It was only just in the last week, with a lot of advertisement and encouragement, that two people have come forward. So it's a fight that you will have, but with perseverance, you will find people who are passionate, and we are moving towards co-chairing. So the burden is not just on one person, and the person can also have lots of support from other members of the advisory group of the network.
Yeah, I think, and Helen Wheaton's just making that point that co-chairs are caring their carers network, and I think again Wilma was talking about co-chairing. I think that having that kind of experience of caring as part of the parents and carers network, one of the co-chairs being that. Yeah. I'm conscious of time, and what we would like to do before we close is to get some of your feedback as participants for our toolkit. If there are any further questions, we can always direct you to ask questions to Kelechi as well. But I'm just so grateful, Kelechi, for that incredible presentation. It's so inspiring what you've done, and I know that I'll probably be coming to you again in the future for questions, because you're the kind of the leading light in this area. Thank you so much. As I say, what we're going to do now, just before we close, is we had thought about doing breakout rooms, but we're going to just, for those of you who are in the room now, is just ask you just to contribute some of your ideas in terms of the toolkit. So I'll ask Anna if it's possible, Anna, for you to share the whiteboard, if that's okay. Grand. So what we'd like you to do is, if you have, some of you have already been doing this in interviews, so again, perhaps what one thing you could think of for a toolkit, and this toolkit would be for a new network or an established network or even a really mature one. What would you want us to include in this toolkit to help us help networks? We want it to be a useful document, so you can think on the left hand side you can add like written text if you just don't use the drop down options and on the tools. So anything that you can think of would be really, and thank you so much already for these comments, this is brilliant. And we're hoping to use this as part of our output at the end. We're trying to collect as many views as possible, and yet if you want to put it in the chat as well, that's fine. Just everywhere you feel comfortable putting it. but it's great to have it on the whiteboard so we can all kind of have a look at the aggregated views. Statements of commitment rather than rules. Yeah, it's the line manager theme coming through again. Yeah, it's a really challenging area, that the line manager. See, Madiha is giving us some gems in the chat. So we've got support for managers to look after their teams who have caring responsibilities. Yeah. How to win more funding from central services. So Kelechi is a great example of that. More visibility for carers. Yeah, and again, that checklist is one of the starting points for that. I think potentially, Kelechi, I'm just putting you on the spot here, but I wonder if we could put the checklist in the toolkit as something that anyone who is starting up one of these networks could use. That might be quite a nice way of kind of a practical resource. Support for baby loss, absolutely. Research and evidence to support business cases. I think we've seen from Kelechi's presentation that how valuable that data is, and how much that can be used to justify some of the policies and the funding. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, carers leave. I think just to re-emphasize that differentiation at Newcastle, with you can take fragments of a day, like an hour to attend an appointment rather than having to take a half day. You know, that's so important. Yeah, the employers for carers membership, I think we'll be signposting that. Consistency in the policies, guidance and training. Oh, if you can't see the whiteboard, please, if you have any thoughts in the chat, would be great. Yes, Kelechi, definitely Newcastle will be acknowledged. Yes. Yeah, that's a good idea, Clements, like conversation templates for line managers and team leaders. I think that's that would help to bring aboard some of that consistency. Financial support staff to pay for caring. Yeah, while away at conferences. Yeah, really good one. Yeah, Kate, that there's the passport that Kelechi was speaking about. It is actually the original, one of the templates is from the government website. So we can share that link at the end, and then having that in the toolkit as well would be a good place to start, I think. Minimum set of interventions adapted by all HCIs. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think that some of those difficult topics, and it kind of connects back as well to the discussion around fathers forums as well, a way into speaking about things like baby loss. I think that's a really, and you know, with carers as well, you know, the same talk of death and when caring stops. I think that's a really kind of challenging, but so important to acknowledge in the workplace.
Mark, I've put the carers passport link
brilliant.
On there.
Yeah,
it has exactly the same information that ours have. You just need to tweak it to suit your organization. Yeah.
It's a great resource, that. Thank you, Kelechi.
The only thing we've added to ours is the list of leave that the person has access.
Yeah, I think that addition it's so powerful, though, to have that kind of itemization of the leave that they've had, and kind of helping that to be transparent, and so that, because I think one of the things you've mentioned before is how, you know, when your line manager changes, that history's there. You can actually review it, and it's not starting from scratch, you know, having the review conversation. Yeah, I think that's a really important element. So brilliant contributions here. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, role descriptors for chairs and co-chairs. I think that's one of the things that we were, where that might differentiate is between informal and formal. I think there'll be something in that as well. But I think it would be useful, especially with recruiting chairs and co-chairs, to get a better sense of what it involves. And case studies, I think that's a really good example there. I'm thinking of doing that at Northumbria, some sort of vignettes or stories of what people have done, so that people know it's possible.
I think our stronger argument right now is the new Carers Act. How the
yes.
Yeah, that will strengthen any argument. And somebody's written the facts on why having a passport is good for the organization. Well, I think the main point there is that the Care Act of 2014 was put into force to ensure that disabled people have the same rights as the carers have the similar rights as the disabled people that they are looking after. So it means technically that the same rights that carers have, disabled people should have it. And that's what the law has stipulated in relation to the Care Act. So if a disabled person has a personal evacuation plan in terms of emergency, and what to do in terms of emergency, why shouldn't a carer have a carer passport about how they can be supported in their caring role at very critical times in their career?
Absolutely. So Hannah's saying we've got some examples at, is that Nottingham Trent, Hannah? I think it must be NTU, of how flexible working has been made to work. For example, head of quality, academic quality role has been a job share for several years. Yeah, job sharing, I think, reducing some of the stigma around that. I'll be happy to, oh, thank you for that case studies. That's brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Madiha. I think she might have already left, but yes, I think we will. I think having a resources signposting section will be really good.
In terms of reference for the networks, very important as well. Reference. Yeah. So they are not working against the organization and vice versa.
We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm just so grateful for you all contributing to this. It's been a lot of enthusiasm, and we really wanted to put this something useful on for people attending, and I'm hoping that the recording can be useful as a resource that you can share with members, and for those who weren't able to attend today, they can follow up on this. It's been a pleasure to share this time with you. Thank you so much. If you have any comments that you'd like to continue adding or sending, we have a final slide with our email, but also I think on the Eventbrite, I think our email is there. I'll type mine into the bottom. We want to continue the conversation is kind of the emphasis I want to make here.
Thank you all. And also, if you haven't done so and you'd like to, please volunteer to be interviewed by myself or Mark and contribute even more to our project.
Definitely. We're still doing the interviews. I'm finding them incredibly rewarding to do. Some of you I've actually had the pleasure of speaking to already, and I'm learning so much from it, and I'm hoping that that's going to really benefit our project as well. So it's lovely to see your faces, those of you I recognise, and I will hopefully see you again soon. But one of the things I would just leave you with is in the next year, we're hoping to do a event which might be more hybrid based, and that will be kind of summing up the whole project, and launching the toolkit as well, and bringing people together. So that's our next year plan as the project comes to a close. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. But please stay in touch, because we're all part of this network together, and together we can make change happen. Right. Bye bye, everyone.